I think it's a huge opportunity for customer success, but it's an example of another way that customer success can make itself indispensable when cuts come and pressures come. They say, what would we do without them? We cannot see our company without that role and that function staffed as it is today. Okay. Tell me what you want me to do.
Stand by.
Next.
You ready?
Okay. Okay.
What's going on, folks? Thanks for joining us. You're listening to Lifetime Value, the customer success podcast, where we help you wrap up the week that was in customer success and start you off on the right foot for the one ahead of you. I am your host, the Ben Affleck working the drive-thru of a Dunkin' Donuts of customer success podcasts. My name is Dillon Young, and this week's guest of honor is the CEO of not one but two companies, Chief Listening Officers and Radically Authentic Discovery. He is a board member, an entrepreneur in residence, a strategic advisor, and a reformed marketer. Bob London is with us today. Hey, Bob.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I enjoy these. I prefer being in a setting where I'm answering questions versus having to come up with my own stuff. So this is good. I mean, hopefully it'll go well.
Bob, tell us about, in the order you would like, Chief Listening Officers and Radically Authentic Discovery.
So I'll focus on, they both sort of intersect, and what I mean by that is Radically Authentic Discovery is basically a training. I'll start with that and we'll see where it goes. I teach teams, companies, customer facing folks in B2B companies how to have more strategic conversations with customers and prospects. And I do that in a number of ways, but I teach them to ask much more interesting questions that disrupt customers' thought patterns so that customers engage instead of just sort of tuning out instantly. And then some listening skills to basically just shut the hell up and get out of the way, let the customer talk about what they think is important. And if you study this, like I have, you see that customers believe, buyers believe, and customers that we don't give them the time and space to talk about what's important to them. We tend to box them in with agendas and guardrails and leading questions. So I teach teams not to do that and to do my way, a better way. I was going to say I teach them to ask better questions.
Hey.
But I decided not to.
Well,
I decided not to say that.
No, you did. You
Too late.
Decided to say it. For all of
Okay,
those.
now you have to do editing.
Well, no, for all of those listening and not watching, I have a full-size axe hanging behind me, and Bob just couldn't help himself. He had to call it out. Bob, what do you see your folks that you work with have more trouble with, asking the right questions or shutting the hell up?
I would say they're equal, and it's not their fault. People come by this honestly. I would say that let's start with the listening, staying quiet, embracing silence, and all that. You can look almost anywhere and find courses and tips and posts and everything on how to present, how to pitch, how to sell, how to talk. It's a lot harder. There's no Toastmasters though for listening. I always wondered why Toastmasters, if you're familiar with it, Toastmasters is a group of people that get together in chapters where they learn techniques for public speaking and they kind of hold each other accountable. And so there's one person speaks in a given session and then everyone else is listening. So why don't they just train the listeners while they're at it, right? Like they're all already listening, but there's no heavy emphasis on half of the conversation. Half is talking,
Should
half
be
is
more than
listening,
half,
roughly.
really, right?
Well, yeah, but I guess my point is anytime someone's talking, someone's listening. So that's automatically, it becomes a 50-50. So that part is hard, but I think people are getting better at it. What's equally hard is when I show them one of the questions that I want them to ask a customer. For example, hey, customer, what if you got a call from one of our competitors tomorrow, how would you react? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is you'd ignore or delete. 5 is you'd pretty quickly get back to them and find out what they're up to, what they do, how they do it. And what number would you give? That's a hard question to think about asking if you're in the mainstream customer success world, let's say, where you've been coached to just focus on features and be the coach for the customer about the product, and to be that curious and bold about bringing up the word competition, which you don't want to give competitors any oxygen in the conversation. what I tell them, and the truth is that customers won't, they will answer because they find it to be a very authentic question. Like, oh yeah, we get competitor calls all the time, or we're on their email
Mhm.
list, their drip
Mhm.
campaigns. So it's not that the customer won't engage with the question. They love the question. It's not about the competitor. That's not what they answer. The gold is when they give you a number, like say five, I'd get back to them. Hey, thanks for being so candid. Uh, What would cause you to respond, or why'd you give a five? Well, some of them say, well, just as a courtesy, we like to respond, even if we're not interested in looking around. And in this case, Bob, we're not looking. But with that said, you never know when you're going to learn something new about how I can do my job better. And there are companies out there that maybe the software isn't as good as yours, but they have good best practices, or they have good content, or they have good
Yeah.
speakers. And who knows, one day we might get a mandate from up on high that we need to cut costs, and then kind of all bets are off. It's a way to get customers to open up on their terms. And competitor is just simply something that vendors tend to, we pretend like they don't
Yeah.
exist, et cetera. So,
I think it's a position of vulnerability too. To
yes, 100%. That's a great word.
the answer may not be what you want to hear. I have this joke that if you're doing your job right, every customer meeting you have, you leave with more to do, not less to do.
Hmm.
And it's a joke because I'm lazy. But I think that question could generate a lot of work for you. And do you really want to do that work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I am one of the points I love that you just said about you have to be vulnerable. It takes some risk to ask the
Hmm.
question, and customers appreciate the authenticity there. Also, you can't solve a problem if you don't know it
Sure.
exists.
Yeah.
I've seen much more good, constructive, positive insight come from the answer to that question than anything negative. What I mean by that is if they say, yeah, we're not looking around, there's nothing that would really compel me to be looking around, even when our contract is up for renewal. Okay, thanks. Thanks for letting me know. What's so sticky about us?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of gold in there. I think the biggest difference is, as you alluded to, you're kind of just turning it into a conversation between two people instead of this sort of overly stilted vendor
Hmm.
speak,
Hmm.
guardrails, agenda, locked in,
Hmm.
scripted. Let's just lighten up a little bit and make it more human,
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure everyone's customer is a human being. That's what they all have in common.
So, Bob,
I hope.
I alluded to this in the introduction. Your background is in marketing, and you found
Yeah.
customer success a little bit, I don't want to date you, but it's a little bit later in your career. How did you
Yeah.
find it, and why do you stick around?
So I was basically a fractional chief marketing officer after a career as a marketing manager through
Sure.
executive. And as a fractional chief marketing officer, I was kind of honing into a specialty of doing positioning, strategy, go to market, product market fit, value proposition, brand messaging. I guess I could have easily been the guy who says, "Oh, you're ready to start spending money on marketing, Mr. or Ms. Founder, CEO? Yeah, let's do that. And here's a plan." But they couldn't answer the most basic things about their market and their customer. And so I started doing these customer listening tours
Hmm.
for money, and I loved it. And after doing that for 5, 6 years, I met a guy named Jay Nathan,
Mm.
who is the co-founder of Gain, Grow, Retain, and his crew, Jeff Brunsback, and that whole community. And Jay, I was introduced to Jay, who said, "Wow, these questions are great that you teach people to ask, and the listening techniques are great. You're basically help. You could help us in customer success have more strategic customer conversations, because we're stuck below the line, like features, reactive. We need to get into the customer's business, and so we can really add value and keep them as customers and retain them." I kind of downplayed. I was like, nah, that's not that interesting to me. But I've ended up now, fast forward, listening to Jay and others, of being introduced to customer success teams and sales teams and account management, and finding that they appreciate a new way to do what amounts to discovery, but on a more continuous basis and in a more authentic way. And that's how I got into it. I've only been in it in customer success is one market for me. It happens to be a market that it was sort of this wonderful lake or pond, very welcoming and very like everyone's
Yeah.
around the lake and everyone's singing customer success theme songs. And I'm not being sarcastic at all. I love it, and it embraced me and the content that I provided. Having said that, that's one market. So I mean, anybody who's in a position where they're talking to other people really needs to understand this. And I've even had people suggest to me that there should be a course on how to talk to your peers in other organizations. How does customer success, how would product teams talk to sales teams to understand their priorities? How would marketing talk to sales, et cetera? But anyway, account management and sales are good audiences for me as well. But customer success has that heartbeat. It's just relatively new and people are still figuring it out. So it's kind of cool to be part of that, or just be an observer of that figuring it out process. Are we product led growth, customer led growth? I love all that.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I think customer success folks can sometimes just think about the customer experience, but I am consistently reminded that in many ways, customer success, there are vendor and customer relationships, even internally, right? Service provider relationships
100%.
and things like that. So it's important to have that communication internally as well and not just serving your customer externally. So that's a interesting
Can
call
I
out.
may I amplify what you said and also add something to
Sure.
it? I think the most important relationship for the chief customer officer, maybe this sounds obvious, is with the CEO and the CFO, but mostly the CEO. So, in other words, building value with customers so that they stay has proven to be valuable to companies. But the real measure of a department is when budgets become tight. And I know because I've been in marketing.
Hmm.
15 years ago, marketing had a somewhat amorphous internal value proposition. Like, what are they doing over there in marketing? They're ordering pens. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I'm not trying to crap on marketing. I'm just saying that was the reality that I
Hmm.
watched and lived through.
Ordering pens.
And it was hard for marketing to justify itself based on revenue and business drivers, like the love language of the CEO, right? And I think with customer success, if customer success is being put under pressure and cut, it's horrible because there are humans involved. But that's a statement that a company is making and that investors and CEOs are making, that we think we can withstand those cuts. So the only group that can answer that would be the leadership, to either, say to the company, no, you're misunderstanding the value we're delivering to the company every day, or to revisit whether you are adding value to the company every day. Is retention enough? I think there are people who will get very frustrated hearing that, but I'm an outsider, so I try to stay as objective as I can in the hopes of helping the situation over the long
Hmm.
term.
Objectivism can be seen as not being an ally, Bob, for
Yeah,
better or worse. I actually just had a conversation yesterday that said the same thing of if customer success teams are not willing to own a number, right? That kind of corny, ambiguous phrase, own a number, then they're going to die. And it was kind of that
yeah.
stark, that,
I want to just
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not qualified to even say that because I'm not an insider. No, what I mean is, whether it's owning a number or some other way of proving that you are you have to be, your team has to be indispensable.
I got you.
And what that means could be owning a number. The thing that I see, customer success teams talk to, hundreds of customers a week. Where are all the insights going? Are they going into a black
Mm,
hole? In other words, are we using what we hear in those conversations to help that
mm,
customer, or are we abstracting those conversations into insights and synthesizing them in a way that can help marketing with
yep.
content development, that can help product with features? And I don't have as much visibility as I'd like into the coal mine of that, but from what I hear, it's just people are too busy doing their job to take a step back and use those insights. I think it's a huge opportunity for customer success, but it's an example of another way that customer success can make itself indispensable. And that when cuts come and pressures come, they say, well, we can't. What would we do without them? We cannot see our company without that role and that function staffed as it is today.
So I think this is a good opportunity for us to jump into a couple of the topics that have been circling the customer success community over the past week. And so the first one I want to bring up is this idea of customer data. It appears you're hearing a good subsection of folks in the community try to elevate customer data in the conversation, right? If there's 5 or 6 things that a customer success team needs, and like, hey, look, the first one is CRM, maybe the second one is the customer success platform,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. There's an argument being made, and I believe this is where I originally saw this was an article that They Said wrote. And of course they would, because they sell a customer data platform. But this argument that customer data is
Now, I was just to say that my wife will say things like, they're saying it's going to rain, or they say you need to get this vaccine. I'm like, I always like, who's they? Now I know it's they said.
yeah, yeah. Well,
They're the ones
yep.
behind it.
And in this case, they're selling customer data platforms. I think there's something to that, right? For the same reason you just said, because it is that data that allows us to take informed action. And that's, in my opinion, the only action that exists these days, right? Everything else is just hypothesized action. And there's really
Right,
no way for us to measure whether that was successful or not, because we don't know if the statement was true in the first place. So
right.
you're not starting from a concrete point to try and measure what you're doing after the fact. Do you agree with that? Are you, in the conversations you have with customers, are you hearing the same thing, like data, data, data?
No, but only because I'm not involved in any of
Okay.
that. I think that if first of all, I'll just comment that the people that they said, formerly Nuff
Mm-hmm.
said, are among those, I think, doing the boldest and most consistent job of elevating the dialogue of improving the brand of customer success, and how to do that by stop doing everything you're doing today and start doing things differently. Like, they had a whole issue of their magazine focused on customer success owning product market fit.
Yep.
It's this brilliantly simplistic notion that, why wouldn't the group that talks to most of the real humans using the product understand best what the fit is? And so I'll just say that. With that said, I wouldn't just agree with everything they said just because I like them. But I think data, yeah, I mean, I think data is unquestionably a way to balance out the human insight, human intelligence, with things that you can actually look at and say, oh my God, it's screaming at us from the data that this is an answer to the question we've been asking. Someone still has to make a decision on it after that. That's the Jeff Bezos thing. Like, we got all the data. I mean, someone's had a great idea, Amazon Prime. We should build that. Yeah. What's the business case? Some people said it's great. Other people said no. At the end of the day, someone still had to make a decision to do it. But the data is huge. I mean, it's the bigger you get, the more important it is, and the more obligated you are as a company to have your data shit in order so that you can read from it and make decisions
Here's
from
the
it.
thing I want to challenge, this idea of the bigger you are, the more it matters. I might argue that if you are a 3-person company, the data still matters, because your hypothesis only
Oh,
takes you
yeah. I
so
thought you were going to say
far.
something else.
And,
Yeah.
I've seen this happen, recently, where companies get the order wrong in let's say, the order of operations of how they try to stand up a customer success org. I actually think you need the data more than you need the individual titled folks to act on it.
Right. First of all, you just used one of your challenges. You don't have any left now.
But
You
I
just
make the
gave me a
rules here,
challenge.
Bob. Thank you very much.
I'm kidding. If your challenge is successful, you get to keep it. I think you're right. I mean, look, I'm also a believer in the amazing degree to which having a founder leader who is in tune with, who understands the market and the customer, either from data or their own experience or anecdotally, and is making the right decisions. I think that data or anecdotes from the field or from the team become arguing points because the founder or leader has never spoken with a customer or doesn't talk to them enough or has their own sort of technology driven view of what to build without understanding the practical applications of it and keeps talking about it in terms of bits and bytes versus use cases and outcomes. So I agree with you about the
I
data.
don't think
Your
that
point, you can
changes
never be too small.
when it's no longer the founder, right? So I think your assumption there and your talk track there is around the founder being like your chief product officer. I think even if they weren't, right, if they were the finance guy or they were your sales guy and they had they brought in a technology guy, I don't think that changes. I think that conversation is always a challenge for, I don't want to malign an entire profession, but for product folks, it takes a lot of work. Most of the work is around having those conversations, analyzing that data, trying to make this puzzle piece fit as many not as many scenarios as possible, but so that it's serving as many of the customers as possible with this. It's a very elegantly designed solution or feature, right? That is a
Yeah,
really hard thing to
yeah,
do, and I think you see so many product folks who just try to kludge it. They just say, "Oh yeah,
that, that makes sense.
you need a button. Here's a button, and it's in the wrong place on the wrong page. It does the wrong thing, and it's because they didn't ask the right questions
Yeah,
or have enough
yeah,
conversations."
and I want to distinguish between user testing and user interviews versus I would say that I operate more at the brand and the customer experience level, meaning that I will never in my world, what I do does not help of what button is needed and where that button goes. That's not what I do. I'm really trying to understand what the vast majority of the customer's time is being spent on independent of the solution that we offer because that's how you grow. Yes, there has to be someone focused on the product, of course. I mean that I'm assuming that's happening, but I don't do product research for that reason because the big gap is if you're just doing product research, you're looking at the person as a user. And what I'm saying is don't just look at them as a user, open the aperture to them to see their whole job because there's gold there. And then to open it even further to understand their company's priorities and challenges, because that's the operating environment in which they exist. And they have to tie what they're doing ultimately to something that the company needs to get done. And that's where the conversations that I do are helpful. I am, by definition, I'm not in the quantitative side of things. I would never look. I don't need to look at product usage data or heat maps to understand anything. What I do can be blended with that information. So I just want to be clear that I operate in a way that I may not be able to answer the stuff you're talking about in an authoritative manner. I have my own.
Well, so no, but I think you did answer it. I think you did, and maybe you didn't realize it because I would agree that a good CSM is not having that conversation either. I think they put a product person in a room, so to speak, with the person from the company who can answer that question. Maybe it's a group of them, right? Maybe it's users, maybe it's a manager, I don't know. And they have that conversation. I don't want to be responsible for asking the questions that inform the product guy how to build the product. I believe,
Yeah,
and I believe I am aligned with what you're saying. Customer success should understand the overall business model, the strategy, the direction, and try to maintain as much alignment, as much overlap as possible between my company and my customer's company.
yeah, I think that's well said. I guess I'll add one thing, and that is I think there's too much of a vendor's attitude saying we need to know what to build customer tell us what we should build as opposed to, and that's not their freaking job.
Mm-mm.
That's not the customer's job. We're supposed to be really good at understanding what they're trying to accomplish and then building something accordingly. And
Yeah.
that's why I think what I believe based on my work is customers are experts in their job, not our product. They don't want it. No one ever said, I want to grow up to be a software
Mm-hmm.
user and become a power user.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a job people aspire to. I think it's a role that they're thrust into, which is why when you ask about their job, their broader job responsibilities and their company, they open up and they talk to me 80% of the call. or 85%, because you're asking about what they're experts in and what they're comfortable talking about. When you start asking for feedback on what you're doing and how it works and all that, and sort of our side of the fence, it's more of a chore for them. That's what I think happens, and I think it fits into that comment I made at the start of that point, which is just that we're let's not ask customers to do our jobs for us too much. They got a lot to do. Let's not ask them to tell us what to build.
Remind me, did I win my challenge? Okay,
Yes.
great. So I'm going to challenge you again.
I don't. It doesn't matter whether you did or not. I'm going to
Yeah,
say yes
because
because I want you to
I'm the
have another
boss.
one.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, it's your thing. You can edit it however you
um,
want.
I think I would add a small wrinkle to what you just said. I think you can ask whether your product is serving their needs, but I
Yeah,
think you have to meet them there. You don't get to say, hey, does this feature work for you? You have to ask the question through the lens of what their daily workflow is. Hey, so I know you do this, this, and
yeah,
this. And it's my understanding or my theory that it's at this point you would use my product to streamline this workflow. Now we've designed this to do blah 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 blah. Do you find that it's saving you
yeah,
time?
yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's. By the way, I think that's a bit too leading of a last piece of the question. Do you find that it's saving you time? But yes, um,
Well, but I
I
want a good
I would
answer,
say
right?
that those so challenge accepted again. You win. You keep your challenge. Ask as many challenges as you want at this point. But I think that the customer is more likely to engage effectively in that part of the conversation if the first part of the conversation was exclusively about them and their world, without
Yeah.
continually pivoting to like, oh, well, if you said that, let me throw this at you. Instead of just let them play it out, you're disarming them, and you're basically teaching them that you are not just another CSM at another vendor who is trying to walk you through a checklist of things in a slideshow. Instead, you are curious about them. And that's what makes the part of the conversation about the product the most effective, is because they feel like, okay, you asked about me. Now you can ask about you.
So I think this might dovetail nicely into another question I had, some other stuff I've seen coming out in the past week or so, and this is this idea of, I think it's been around for a while, but I'm seeing it a couple of times recently, around specialization in customer success management roles. So this idea that maybe, hey, we should be hiring, if I sell accounting software, my CSMs should be previous accountants. And that was a random example I just gave, but I think it actually strikes the right note here because those are not the same people. As far as I understand it,
Right.
those are two people who, I mean, look, if you just took the caricature of those two positions in your head, the juxtaposition would be stark. But I think also the skill sets are so completely different. And so
Yeah.
now I'm asking you another leading question because I've already told you how I feel about this. What do you think about that concept? And do you think it has legs? Could it work?
Well, I see it a lot. I work with teams, and every so often, when the team is introducing themselves, let's say at a ed tech
Mm.
company, and someone says, "Yeah, in fact, I used to be an administrator at school, and I used to be a customer of this company, and now I work here and in customer success." I can't tell you that those are the best CSMs on that team. I have no way of knowing. I like it because it brings empathy with it. It's almost like having a customer in the
Social
room, that
proofing. It's
mindset.
social proofing. But I don't.
Um, I don't know. I think it's that chair that like it's, again, the Jeff Bezos thing. There's always an empty chair in every meeting, and that chair represents the customer or something like that. That it does bring a version of the voice of the customer into the room. It's a person in the room that the team can go to and say, "Hey, you used to be a customer. What do you think of this?" The risk, of course, is that you're running those questions through one person who may have their own biases. So I think there is something there. I just don't know why that's a thing. I read something today for the first time. CSM specialization, is that a thing? Like, do we now have to do that? Like, I don't understand. Is that a prescriptive thing, or is it just like, let's try that and see how it goes? I don't know. But anything that brings the customer's voice into the room on the vendor side to me is worth looking at.
Isn't that what a CSM's job is? Like table stakes?
Yes, but I think if that CSM used to be a customer, it just kind of puts an extra layer of maybe authority around whatever they say because it's firsthand instead of secondhand.
Mm. Hey, so people keep getting fired, Bob, but there's one very specific company out there who has just done their second round of layoffs, Twilio. And in the second round of layoffs, they eliminated their entire customer success team. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts on that? Just kind of like at that broad level.
Well, on a personal level, it's incredibly painful and unfortunate, and it worries me. On another level, I wonder if the customer experience or CS leadership really did the most convincing job of proving why they should not be eliminated, or why is it even a question? Why are you even thinking about eliminating us? We're indispensable. Or was that entire organization not doing stuff that the company valued enough in real life? I don't know the answer to those things, but I know that there is a conversation in some quarter. So there's the conversation that happens inside of customer success in the community, which is how hard the job is, how valuable the role is, how important it
This
is,
feels hot takey. It
indispensable.
feels like you're about to give a hot take, and I'm here for
Uh-oh, now I have to live up to it.
it.
There's the conversation inside, but the conversation outside of customer success is like you're just another function that has to prove itself. So if you're proving yourself in real business terms, not CS language, but business speak, then yeah, we'll hire more of you. That's all you have to do is prove your value. But you have to prove it to me as a business person, meaning an investor, a CEO, a CFO, a COO, instead of you just thinking that because you're talking to customers and doing your job that you deserve it to stay exactly where you are. I'll go back to the marketing example. Marketing went through these horrible, wrenching B2B marketing in particular, wrenching tectonic shifts where they were the first group to be looked at to cut the fat, or during a downturn, until there became more predictability and revenue ownership in marketing
Hmm.
by virtue of marketing automation and more scientific methods and contribution to the top and middle of the funnel and moving the funnel along. And I think customer success is going through that same thing. The hardest part to swallow for customer success is that there are people, successful people, not in customer success, but in particular, there's a guy named Frank Slootman
Mm.
who wrote a book. He was the CEO of Snowflake, among other companies. And in the book and in other forums, he questioned, why do we need customer success? If everyone's doing their job well, we shouldn't. Why do we need a dedicated department to that for that? And it's such a like take the bait kind of thing
Hmm.
because it's such an easy thing to react to
Hmm.
and say like what? But if you are dispassionate about the subject and you read that and you see it through just plain old business terms like good business sense, you're like, well, I don't know. Does he have a point? Let's analyze that.
Yeah.
And but that's one. And Snowflake happened to be an unbelievably fast growing, highly profitable company, so people listen to that. It's okay for people on the outside. It's important for people on the outside to raise questions.
Yeah.
The questions, does it get to a point where the questions have to be answered? And layoffs, unfortunately, are a way of answering a question like that.
So,
It's sad and it's gut wrenching, and I've been fired, and that's what, luckily for me, led me to being independent.
and here
I
today,
just didn't know why. Yeah.
I have a question for you. Actually, first a statement. So you called out, you're seeing a lot of these, you see a lot of parallels between where marketing was 15, 20 years ago and where customer success is today. And one of the things you mentioned in there was quantifiable performance metrics and how marketing had to get in the
Hmm.
game with those. And one of those that I immediately think of is MQLs, marketing qualified leads.
Yeah.
It's very data driven, and it totally makes sense now that I think about it, that you're seeing this idea of the CSQL much more often, the customer success qualified lead. as a way
Mhm.
of as
It's a great
justifying our
example.
value. To put a period on this topic, I want to ask you if there was one learning that customer success could take from the marketing experience that you went through, what would it be?
Well, I think at the leadership level, it has to be the lesson for customer success, looking back at what transformations marketing has been through, is to embrace the messages that are being sent to you instead of dismissing them or defending against
Hmm.
them. Embracing a message is, we think we can do without so many of you in the department. Why? Because you're checking boxes and focus. I'm talking about marketing. You're doing activities, but we can't connect all those outcomes. And they're nice activities like events and
In
collateral.
theory,
We
yeah.
can't it on paper. Yes, we asked you to do them, but we can't connect them with outcomes that the company believes is important right
Mhm.
now. And I'll give you the most clear embodiment of that is, I mean, I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of marketers' resumes. I have not looked at a single CS resume.
I'll send you mine.
But marketers' resumes back in the day were like, organize 3 customer events, bullet point. Next bullet point, develop 6 pieces of collateral. Next
Yeah.
bullet point, manage the launch of this new customer
Yeah.
program or whatever, or lead gen. And the feedback was always like, a business person looks at that and says, that's what you did. What
Yeah. What was the
happened?
result?
Did
Yeah.
something change or grow?
Hmm.
Was there an outcome? So I would say that if people can just imagine their own resumes or LinkedIn profiles, is to think about, and it's gotten so much better across the board, not just in marketing. I mean, people have very strong, unfortunately, they can't always point to great results because the company or the product wasn't where it needed to be.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's an embodiment of what I'm talking about try to think in terms of business outcomes, not just your job. By the way, that takes us back to how we should view customers. What is the business outcome that they're expected to achieve? And just to drive that point home, if I have another
Yeah.
moment on this topic, one of the questions that I encourage your listeners to ask their customers, something like this. I'm guessing your job description is like a page or two long, single space. Like when you signed up for the job, there's a lot on there. It's really a lot. But a lot of times it all boils down to one thing that's pretty big and important to the company that the company's counting on you and your team to get done. Is there one thing like that for you? And that is a great way for you as a CSM or an account manager or sales or product to understand what are they really on the hook for. But what's fascinating is the person you're asking, the customer doesn't even often know. So you hear them thinking it out loud, like, sometimes I get very clear, concrete answers very
Hmm.
quickly. Sometimes, like, that's a good question. I've never thought about that before. I'm like, well, you better think about it. And then they start talking it through in their head out loud. And then they say, I think it's X. That's how people have to think about their own jobs. What's the thing? Like, you can mess around and waste a lot of time in a job if you don't know what's really important, not just to make your boss look good, air quotes, but to help your company be as successful as it can
Yeah.
be.
Period.
Exclamation point.
Bob, let's move on to my favorite segment, which I think you may have a good contribution to. This is called BS and CS. If you had to choose one, what is the trend, catchphrase, or otherwise related to customer success that you would like to see done away with forever?
Blank led growth.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I said blank. I think that, to your point earlier about companies each have their own agenda and everything that comes out of the company, you know, at the end of the day, it's to accomplish something that company wants to accomplish. And so I think, you could pit product led growth against customer led growth, against CS led growth, against sales led growth. And I'm sure someone right now is drafting up something called growth led
Hmm.
growth. I'm not a big on that kind of stuff. I'm not big on. I don't know if I would call it a shiny object. I would just say that it's all buyer beware. Like, why am I? Again, it's back to the CS specialist thing. Should I be paying attention to? How do I know I should really be paying attention to that? is it because of who said it and what experience and authority do they have? I think one thing to be careful about, everybody, is when you're reading LinkedIn and people are saying something, you just have to know if it's an opinion or if it's based on some research or authority they've done. Otherwise, you can find anything you agree with, you know.
Mm-hmm. Ed Powers. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Absolute
Yeah.
big brain of a man, and a great head of hair. He said
You didn't say another big brain. So in other
he's the only
words,
one.
he's a big brain, I'm
Yep,
not.
exactly.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
I mean, yeah, you can paint me in that quarter. That's fine. He said something similar of like, question the information that you receive. And it doesn't have to be with a negative bent. It doesn't have to be a cynical question, but just like, hey, does that apply to
Skeptical.
me? Do I need that
Yeah.
right now?
No, that's really good. That's really
And
good.
I think, man, I remember in high school, I think it was like a marketing class, the epiphany of learning that marketers were like trying to get your attention with a very specific purpose in mind. When you're like 14, you're like,
Right.
holy shit, the world's out to get me. But I think it's true. Like, you just have to be very careful about understanding incentives and motivations of the information that you consume, especially in the society that we're in now. You look at like a Facebook or an Instagram and stuff like that. Like, it is not, the algorithm is a real thing, and it is not
Yeah.
always your friend.
Did you see a movie called The Social Dilemma by any chance?
I believe I did. I may have blocked it
Yeah,
out
it
because it
really got
freaked
me.
me out.
Yeah, it got me to deactivate my Facebook account. It was very powerful.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. It
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I mean, it was. By the way, Facebook, I know that you recently reactivated my account without me agreeing to it, because I'm not kidding you. It's unbelievable. I know what happened, that their CFO said, "Oh my God, we're really looking light this quarter. Can we just reactivate? Can someone just reactivate a bunch of accounts to make the numbers look good?" I mean, I hate to be so cynical, but they've literally reactivated
Well,
my
Bob,
account
look, I got to
without
tell you, nobody
me
from
doing anything.
Facebook's listening to this. Unless you want to send this link to every person at Facebook, which I would
I'm not
appreciate.
sending it to anybody. I'm not sending it to anybody.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Jeez.
anybody at Facebook. Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
No,
Just because I said you don't
I'm
have a
all in
big
on
brain?
promoting this. When will this be available? I can't wait to promote it.
Monday. All right.
Monday?
Let's wrap it up, Bob.
Yeah.
Who out there is moving the customer success profession forward in the past 7 days? Who is your CS player of the week?
I'm going to go with Shari Srebnick of Forrester, who I think is a
Friend of
perpetually
the pod.
effective. Well, she mentioned me, so I figured I'd mention her back. No, that's not
Collusion.
why I'm mentioning it. She's terrific, and she is one of those voices of reason inside of CS that has an outside perspective, I think, of what's like. We know what we do, but here's how we can get better. Another person is Jeff Kushmerek, who has a consulting practice with some folks out of Boston. I think I gravitate towards people like you, as I do with you, who have a voice of authenticity, not very sort of stilted and kind of protective,
Notice
but
they're all
more
on the
out
East
there.
Coast.
Another one is Chris Hicken of They Said, who's not on the East Coast. He's in Utah, gorgeous Utah.
Originally from the East
And
Coast?
I just think, I don't know, that's a good question. I think that they're doing a phenomenal job of elevating the conversation outside of CS to say what can CS do to make itself indispensable. I guess that's not how their words. Those are my words to describe them. Yeah, I really admire those folks.
How about a referral or a recommendation? If you could take the audience members and point them in the direction of any one thing, like a consumable, if you want, or an activity, like something you're passionate about, what would it be, Bob?
Well, I am known for being a geek about The Sopranos. Um, I just think that if you want to see artwork, 86 hours of a work of art, and you don't have to watch it all at once. And
Might be
I
hard.
can break that down for you, that I think it is the most authentic piece of TV that had ever been done to that point, because it was done by people, a guy who was in TV and in the old days and hated it and said, I want to do something completely like F you
So this
different.
is The Sopranos you're
Name
talking
his
about.
name.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
you alluded to that, but you
That's not
didn't
what you-
actually say it. So I wanted to make sure.
I'm sorry. Is that what you were at? Were you at?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Did I go in the
That's
wrong
perfect.
direction?
No, I mean, look.
I got one. I got a really good one.
Okay. So you have to rescind The Sopranos, and you have
No. Can I add one
Yes,
more,
you
please?
can.
Is you pick up your phone,
Yep.
close the apps, now pick it up again, dial someone that you love or a friend, loved one, associate that you haven't spoken to recently. Say hello, have a conversation, ask how they're doing, just listen, and just check in and see what's going on. Don't call them to brag. Just talk to someone, please, today. Just talk to someone. Don't text them.
Maybe
Don't
authentically.
WhatsApp them. Yes. Well, it's hard to be inauthentic. I think it's harder to be
Well, so
inauthentic
what
on the
I
phone,
think
so
of
that's why I say call.
is as dudes, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call my guy friend and start quoting Wedding Crashers. And your point is, let's have a conversation about how you're doing. Let's connect.
I like no. I think the Wedding Crashers thing is a perfect example too. I mean, I think it's like just talk to someone that you haven't had a live exchange with
Okay,
in a
fair.
while, or they're going through something even better, and you're checking in. That's a great thing.
Okay.
You know they're going through something, and you're just checking in. Or if you call them and it turns out they're going through something, then just listen and just understand, and don't necessarily try and solve it for them.
Mm.
Speaking of dudes doing stuff.
Yep, that's an old dude move.
Solvers Anonymous.
Where can folks connect with you, Bob?
LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Bob London, or just search Bob London. And strategiccustomerconvos.com is the website I use most.
CONVOS, so short for conversations. Yes.
Yeah, strategic customer convos, CONVOS. Thank you. .com. Yeah, and I love hearing from people with comments, challenges, sales inquiries.
So my last question was, where can folks learn more about Chief Listening Officers and Radically Authentic Discovery? But is that website, strategiccustomerconvos.com?
Yeah, that's the best place.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Bob, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for spending the time.
Well, thank you. And this was as authentic or more than I hoped. And I just really admired the conversation you had with Sherry. I really enjoyed it. And I think it's special, your approach. And so I'm pleased to be part of it.
You've been listening to Lifetime Value, the podcast for customer success professionals. If you like what you've heard, please rate our show and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Please note that the views expressed in these conversations are attributed only to those individuals on this podcast and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of their respective employers. For all inquiries, please reach out via email to Dillon@lifetimevaluepodcast.com. Find us on YouTube via our channel, Lifetime Value, and find us on the socials at Lifetime Value Podcast. Until next time.
Are you a Washington Commanders fan?
Absolutely, 100% not.
Okay, then we can be friends.
I'm a Ravens fan. Does that matter?
Nah, I don't care about them. You're going to lose Lamar Jackson. You guys are about to be irrelevant for a while.
We'll see. I'm not going to start a trash talking thing like 50 some minutes into a conversation like this.
The Eagles are my team, and so...
Well, my son owns a Jalen Hurts trading card that is the special hologram jersey fragment signed, whatever. He got it in a box of random cards when he was drafted. I'm hoping to retire on it.
Well, I mean, that's going to be a sparse retirement. I don't care how good he is. I don't know if that's enough for you to go on any cruises for the rest of your life.
It'll be a few Chick-fil-A meals.